outages while we were in committee meeting yesterday, and so we had to recess till this morning. And so yesterday we left off with the discussion on House Bill 23-9 HS1 to require legislative appropriation for all non-locally sourced funds allocated for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And so the discussion yesterday, we've adopted several amendments, and now the discussion is on civil and criminal penalties. Any further discussion, members? Senator Paul, I think yesterday we voted to include your recommendation that these include any contributions or donations made to the government in excess of 200,000. So we placed the floor. Recognize Senator Paul.
Yeah, so thank you. I was going to ask on that, but you were talking about criminal penalties. But since you brought it up, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask if that amendment that you made, if this were a law last 2 years ago, would it be then very clear that ARPA funds would have to be appropriated? That ARPA, as well as the casinos community chest fund, that even that these are public funds and it's for community benefits. So does that mean that the ARPA and the community chest fund would have to be appropriated? Or
Yes, that was the concern. And Senator Mendiola also brought up the concern of how would this work in an emergency situation where, you know, agencies will need to access these funds immediately. But the hope is that the legislature will act expeditiously in approving any outside source funds to include something similar to CARES Act, ARPA, and the such. However, with your question, you kind of brought up a concern, maybe, but it's something that we can discuss. Something like community benefit fund. Now, we did set a floor of 200,000. Any contributions made over 200,000 will be appropriated. However, in the case of community benefit fund, and maybe members, you can clarify. So, how would this work if did the community benefit fund, was it something that was deposited in increments, or is it supposed to be a
in
one
that situation with IPI, it was in the casino contract agreement, and it basically says 20 million a year, and the governor is the one to identify the the projects, which there's no problem as long as the governor identifies it, give it to the legislature, and then send it to IPI. But the concern that I have with the way that's structured is IPI didn't even want to allow OPA to come in and say how much did you donate already and where did it go. OPA couldn't even have access to those information, and for me, it doesn't sound right that they're being credited for this contribution as consideration for their lease agreement, or especially changes to the existing contract between IPI and the government, and then nobody in the government can look at where the money went. So not even OPA. I met with them 3 times to just say, can you give us where all the money went and how much? They couldn't even have access. So that's why in this legislation, even if anything, let the governor decide, but the legislature kind of like have to
approves?
approve either. Maybe that's something that we can put either by resolution or by appropriation, but where there are specific provision, then at least by resolution. I don't know, but at least the OPA should have um, the right to look into there and get a report.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least that section is included to allow the OPA to do an oversight and audit on all non-locally
Oh, is
sourced
that in
funds.
the provision? All right.
105, section 105.
Thank you.
But in the case of the something like the community benefit fund, is this like a would it be like a way for companies or I guess the administration to go around and say, "Oh, just give me 150 every week," right? So like the first deposit of 150, I don't need legislative appropriation. Let's use that. Give me another 150 and then use that again. I mean, is that something that is addressed, council, by having this?
Piecemeal.
No, unless we word it in a way where we say that total, in total, or yeah.
Yeah, but if we do it per year, that kind of circumvents what you're saying, right? Because if they're making incremental payments, we would never have access to that.
Yeah, like this one-time payment is 150, right? I don't need legislature's approval. Um, Recognize Senator Mendoza.
S- So the only thing I wanted, and I agree with Senator Poe, that is something that we need to make sure OPA has access to for accountability, and also I just want to clarify that when we say community benefit, it's an agreement between DPL, the governor, and the investor. Normally, the legislature is not involved in that, so I think that's something that maybe we should add as a provision on this, because normally when there's a community
that's-
benefit, the project is really up to the executive.
But
Legislature's
the
not involved.
term contributions and donations, I think, kind of encompasses any monies coming in a form of a cash.
But it doesn't
Chairman,
necessarily mean that it's money. It could be projects. Like for example, they did pavilions. They painted pavilions. They did roadside cleanups. They painted curbs. So just wanted to add that in there.
Chairman, I think I did mention to the attorney not to include DPL because I think DPL has a different requirement under the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. That's why I guess I don't know if the attorney Joe mentioned that, but I kind of like wanted DPL out because DPL that's
have
a
to
standard
remit the
procedure
money,
already. You got a lease agreement, then you have community benefits that's somehow related to the project, né? And that's why DPL should be outside of this because that's any contribution there has to be somehow connected to MPLT, né? But it's for others. I'm talking about other than DPL.
Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. But in the instance of the community chest fund with IPI, right, it was with DPL. So I think,
So with DPL, it
Oh, it
was
was with the
directly
government?
with the governor.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
So, council, do we have to address the incremental or what's the term? The partial donation not to exceed 200, but maybe indicate in totality or
Yeah, that's why I think we need to either say that the total contribution should be not more than $200,000. But I think we're concerned with cash donations, like cash donation, cash community benefit, like IPI. That was old cap, the 20 million. But then I was thinking to say something in there, except for DPL, the contribution shall not be made a part of the contract that conflicts with this provision. Except for DPL, but any other company.
They make a contract, right?
Right, because usually it comes in the contract. Like IPA goes in the contract. So language that says So those two contributions, the donations that we're talking about, the community and the cash that exceeds over 200,000 shall not be made up of a part of the contract that conflicts with this provision.
There
I
could
think
be,
it
in
has
other
to-
words, they could be part, but it doesn't conflict with this, right?
Yeah, because
That's right.
we're talking about cash donation and cash community benefit. I don't think we can, it'd be hard to do like all the stuff like ratings. I don't think we care. If the contribution is for Hyatt to build pavilions on like
Which is okay, right?
yeah,
But it's one cash deposit. and
cash,
it's one
cash
account.
is the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Totaling $200,000.
Anything in excess?
When you're talking about contract law, you're talking about an agreement between, for example, ITI and the government on these arrangements, or it's really a separate contract away from the police in this situation, because in some cases, for example, for DPL, when they consider the contract between the lessee and the lessor, normally the investor, which is the lessor, and yes, would put up some contributions. And that contribution could either be cash or, for service for that particular area to benefit. I'm trying to say whether this community test fund is also part of the lease agreement that will reduce the lease or interest during the term of the lease, or it's a separate contract that has nothing to do with the lease or interest.
For me, it's usually some incentive to get the leaders to support it. It's not really not part of any consideration. It's just saying, oh, if you approve it, okay, we'll do this and do that, and so that you provide incentive for example, in the case of casino license agreement, they're talking about provisions of the casino license, and in order for them to approve it, they say, oh, and by the way, we'll give you 20 million a year out of nowhere. I mean, it could be 5 million would have been okay, but they kind of like put that on the table so you can agree to, for example, changes on the extension of the opening of the casino. So that's why there's danger in that, nice. So that they don't make secret deals. The legislature have to come in and approve the CAS. If it's CAS, if they say we're going to build pavilion, maybe we don't care. We already know it's for pavilion, right? But if they say we'll give you 20 million, and then who's going to spend that money? I think the legislature, if it's more than 200,000, I agree, should at least have a say where the 200,000 goes. No, so going back to your question, DPL normally they do that like community benefit or contribution, public contribution, and I don't think we should go there because that's a land issue. But let's say a good question. Let's say CUC wants to approve um, some project, right? And then they say, but we'll give you 200,000 a year or for whatever that project. Do we have the right to appropriate that when it's CUC's contract with company? For example, Intinian, what is that company? Telesource. If they make an agreement with Telesource, okay, CUC, because you sign over the contract and da will give you 200,000 a year for your inventory, equipment inventory or whatever.
But in that instance, right, so you see the autonomous agency.
Right. That's why I'm asking, is that something that we should approve or?
I mean, because CUC's revenues doesn't flow into central government.
So maybe we should say other than autonomous agencies, if it's going to the administration or to the municipal council, or maybe if, other than the autonomous corporations, right?
They open the enterprise fund or business operation where they are self-supporting, self-sustaining, whereas general fund These all are related to governmental, general government operation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're exempted anyway. So
Page 312, we can add that language if that's what we want.
on which one?
Yeah, for
Which
to exempt the.
they're on? It's on page 4. Exemptions.
Yep.
So it already lists all the autonomous agencies. Yeah. All right. Okay. Any other discussions on civil and criminal penalties? Recognize Vice Chair.
Chair, I think yesterday you kind of brought up the minimum of 5 years, but I wasn't quite sure where you were going with that. So could you just elaborate maybe or share your concerns?
Well, I mean, we have to uphold, our duty, and of course, while this is a deterrent on mishandling public funds. 5 years. I mean, if that's the minimum amount of time they're gonna serve, I think. Recognize.
I think when we were working on this legislation last year, I mean, when I was working on it last year, I think we came up with the minimum of 5, with the understanding that anything that any crime committed that's considered a felony anyway. That was the starting um, threshold for penalties. So I think that's it had to be something very serious as far as amounts being
Yeah. Okay.
taken. Because anything below that, I think, was just like a year or $1,000 fee. But I think when we established the 5 years, it was a material amount based on at least what the House Legal Counsel had advised me at the time. I mean, we could always change it,
No, I
to be,
mean,
or maybe establish like um, amounts, and then based on those amounts, the the
the
terms.
years. If
Yeah, but we did talk about that, and I was advised that basically once it's considered a felony charge, that it met a certain threshold, and so that's how we established the minimum of 5 years.
Okay.
But maybe our legal counsel can
Well, I
share.
mean, if we've now, I guess we can leave it since we've already established the 200,000 threshold.
Mhm.
Dave, you had something?
yeah, I just want to clarify the definition of these types of transactions that would constitute reportable to the legislature as other income. I just want to make sure that we can define that type of transactions that would go under each kind of category that should be reported from the administration forward to the legislature.
What do you
What are
mean?
these types of transactions that
It,
were,
it was already defined in terms of non-locally sourced.
yes, so we can identify some examples. What are those types? Like, for example, would a loan from bank or bond, like the administration constitute a non-source transaction that would be reported over here, or, other types of transactions? As an accountant, if we were to track down the types of transactions that would fall under this type of issue that we're trying to resolve, we need to identify examples of those like something to that extent. Yeah. I'm just concerned as to what are the types of transactions we're dealing with that would constitute this type of issues that we're facing?
Well, 'cause the problem is that it's going to be very broad in the sense that there's funding from anywhere, and I know you brought up this issue yesterday that loans, for example, loans wouldn't be, I would think, wouldn't be part of this, wouldn't be affected by this legislation because there should already be a separate legislation that approves the loans and how those monies will be spent. So outside of that, outside of our duty to approve loans, is an additional. This would cover these additional sources aside from the loans. I know, like the MPOT loan that was approved through legislation and how those monies should be spent. The BOG loan, the CDL loan. So all these loans were done through legislation. But in the case of grants and contributions and donations, we did include that in the definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Recognize Senator Mendiola.
So we're still in the civil and criminal.
We're still in the civil and criminal penalties. Yeah. So on section 106, unauthorized expenditures, and you guys have it in front of you. I'm just curious because I feel like on the top it says that a person who violates this act, right, it's considered a felony. But then if you go to failure to obtain legislative certification, it's a misdemeanor. So is that, my question is that only the two aspects of this law where there's a violation? And we're talking about 5 years, 20 years, right? Felony, there's no threshold. Meaning if 100,000 is expended on this without authorization, or versus $500, for example, it's still considered a felony.
It would be it would be 107 because the 500 or the 100,000 is below the 200,000.
200,000.
threshold.
So we're gonna amend that and put the 250 or 200.
It's already in the earlier section that we approved yesterday, right?
Okay.
Council, was it 200?
So the threshold is 200 or 250? 200. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the bill? If there's none, we now move on to the main motion. We have House Bill 23-9 HS1 SD1. Discussions on that? If none, can I get a motion for the adoption? All right, a motion was made and seconded. Can I recognize LA to take roll?
Senator Karina Elmagofnia.
Yes.
Senator Paul A. Mangonia. Senator Dennis T. Mendiola.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, all four members present voted yes.
Thank you, Ms. Jolin. With all four members voting yes, House Bill 23-9 HS1 SD1 is hereby adopted. We now move on to House Bill 2327 HD1 to ensure that the expenditure authority designated in the Annual Appropriation Act retains exclusive control over all funds appropriated to it. Discussion on the bill. So members, this basically allows for the legislature to conduct its own financial transactions, similarly to how the judiciary controls its finances, with the I believe with the understanding that Treasury, central government Treasury, will be the only one used. So this would be treated as a transfer out each fiscal year, and that it'll be up to the legislature to identify and control the expenditures. Any discussion from the members? I think this has been included in
So
several budget bills.
can we get the legal counsel or maybe Dave to explain basically what this will do to our accounts in the Senate legislature?
Okay. Thank you. Right now, we do not
Dave, can you use your mic for, or
brief here. Right now, we don't have an accounting or finance office here in the legislature. With this bill, it will then allow the LB to hire and implement an accounting system, an accounting department with some staff in there and accounting program independently from the administration. So we would have our own reporting reports such as financial statements, set up the accounts for each member's account, allocation account, the salary account for each member. Everything will be accounted for. And and that would then alleviate the burden that we always encounter with the administration in terms of verifying whether our fund balance is correct on a specific time. But this will require additional funding for hiring additional staff, no, to run the accounting department. That's my justification on this. Yeah.
Did the court require similar legislation to enable it to do what we're trying to do?
Not really say something about the court, but what I know is that the court has its own finance department.
How were they able to do that without similar legislation?
I cannot answer that, no, Senator. But what I know is that they are operating on their own accounting system.
what I do know is that every time they would like a change made to their regs in regards to financing or accounting, is they submit notice to the legislature and then we approve their requests. If we don't act on it, it automatically takes effect. So I think we have a 30 or 45-day window to act on any changes to judiciary's regs on procurement and finances. But council, do you have, is that something that
I haven't reviewed this thoroughly, but I know when the House councils and I think Antoinette, there were some discussions back and forth about the issue, and there's a provision in the administrative code that allows the Secretary of Finance to delegate that authority. That delegation and combination of I think the judicial's power to do certain things. I think based on that, it allowed the judicial system to do what it's doing now. And I think there was discussion, how should we do it? And I think the final answer was, let's do it through legislation rather than just trying to convince the Secretary of Finance to delegate that part to the legislature. That was my understanding, having looked at the emails that went back and forth with the councils of the House and Renton. They came out with the final decision to do it through this legislation.
I recognize our
Yeah.
vice chair?
Let me just add that I think there was an issue brought up because I know it was in the admin code that she can delegate, but in the Constitution, the sole authority for public finance is under the control of the Secretary of Finance. So there was kind of like a hint. Does she really have the authority to delegate a constitutional authority? But it's in the administrative code that she can. No.
Recognize our vice chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm just going over the comments from AG's office, and I think he just raises the concern regarding. Um, I'll just read that part of the comment where he says that it should be noted that the Constitution, in describing the Legislative Bureau's duties, does not provide for the duties that this particular bill seeks to assign. The duties that are described are generalized as all required services to the legislature in connection with duties and responsibilities during sessions and committee meetings, and as a repository of all legislative records, files, library, and other documents of the legislature. So it sounds like, from what I understand on reading this, that the constitutional duties maybe for the LB side does not encompass the additional responsibility that this bill is seeking to provide, right? So does that mean we need to make the changes necessary on the LB side first to accommodate for this bill's intent, or what needs to happen first in order for the
Members, we'll take a 5 minute recess. 2027 HD1 up for discussion. Just looking through all the comments made by the AG's office, the judiciary, and concerns brought up by the members, we will table the bill. We now move on to House Bill 2356 to utilize the remaining 60% of the total indirect cost revenue or reimbursement by fiscal year collected for each grant to address the CNMI government's financial deficit and for other purposes. Discussion on the bill. We received comments from Secretary of Finance. Um, Secretary supports the legislation. Provided a breakdown of what a 10% IDC for financial services would have been in the current fiscal year. It would have provided additional 293,000 to financial services. The administrator for OGM proposes to further allocate a percentage of the IDC towards other agencies that work directly with grants, to include Department of Finance and Accounting, Treasury, Procurement, OMB, OPM, Admin Services, Civil Service, Public Auditor. I guess, members, if we can look at the recommendations made by OGM, any objection to adding item E to include additional titles? Grant specialists 2 and 3, and then grant writers 2 and 3. No objections? Okay, I'll just put it as one main motion. Item F proposes to add language, loan costs or cover cost share and matches. Provide line of credit for federal projects and reimbursements, disbursements, and award subgrants and other funds with the governor's concurrence or as deemed necessary. I recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. On F, do we need a little bit more specifics as to the line of credits? Like, is there a threshold? Or are we just going to leave it blank and
I think the threshold, I mean, like an up to amount
yeah,
or no more than, yeah. That's something that we can consider.
right? And we probably need to seek a little bit more clarification on this, right, as to what the reasonable threshold should be, because like I don't know what that threshold is,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think as they start formulating their regs, that number is going to keep going up if they're
right.
charging interest.
So then we would leave it to them when they promulgate those
Uh,
regs.
I mean, I think we would, if we're going to add that section, we should indicate a period to promulgate
Yeah.
regulations on their line of credit portion. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something.
Okay.
The only agency or entity that often that never have a request from the members to apply for this office is the administrator doesn't respond to us at all. I don't know why. For example, for this bill, I requested some information. And he doesn't to respond to our request. And this one doesn't happen only one time. This one has been happening for many times already. Check.
Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe, good.
Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe this question is for the council, I guess. Is it legal to take the I guess the indirect cost and apply it to the deficit? Can we do that with federal? I mean, I know that once the grant or the project is completed, then the indirect cost becomes almost like general funds, right? But I don't know. Can we use the indirect cost money to reduce our deficit?
My understanding of indirect costs, when you apply for a grant, you get a grant and a certain percent you keep because of, for
For
the
your
services that you provided, your costs. It sounds like it's a problem.
Right, I mean, the
We
whole,
may fight with the grantors, you know, uh, requirements. Indirect costs is supposed to stay with the agency.
with the understanding that it's supposed to help, absorb the cost of the administration of
Right.
the grant, right?
Running or
So it's not new money that was generated, it's money that came with the project to help supplement
the,
the cost.
I mean, it's almost like a wash if you look at it, right? If you pay for 200,000 of financial services, let's take the 200 and reduce the deficit or cover other expenses. Just
Yeah, logically,
right.
in concept, but I mean, I guess literally just following the trail of the money and the intent of the money.
See what's happening now in our budget every year. You will see a reimbursement there for indirect cost in the budget. And that affects 60% of the dollar that will be collected from the indirect cost revenue. And that's happening every year in our budget. And that money that will be used to fund the activities
Yeah.
in the government.
so the indirect cost that comes to with the grants is part of the
General revenue.
general revenue.
But they only 60% of it.
60%.
Yeah, that's the one where
I think it should be 65 at this point because they started at 40 and then every year was the.
So it sounds like that may actually look strength.
So what,
Can we do it? We're
but the
doing
60% comes from where? Like, is there language in the?
I think the current statute just provides the 65% is used to. Yeah. Or for the operations, but not for the deficit reduction. Um,
to personnel, right? So we have to be very careful and cautious, how the money is applied and to where.
Yeah.
To just apply to the bottom line. The bottom line consists of
Well, I mean, we can further identify the 50%, and then whatever that would have covered in the general fund side could be used to address the deficit reduction. If we're going to do it in a more transparent and unquestionable
But
way.
is that the only way we could spend that money? I mean, could we spend that money on prioritizing more? I mean, not to say that we're not trying to reduce our deficit, right? But there's more, I feel like there's a lot of pressing matters. If the money can be used in that way, not the entire 60%, maybe a percentage of the 60% can also go to other priorities that we couldn't accommodate with the budget.
I think maybe each fiscal year we have to determine what the IDC is, and then whatever that percentage goes to the agencies that we're going to identify. We can always reduce those agencies and then reallocate those funds to the other needs. Unless we're going to just dump it all in one account and then appropriate it every year. That's another. Um,
Maybe later it's gonna bring up the financial report of the Philippine government as of September 30, 2020. Our general fund balance deficit is approximately $134 million. And if we were to retire this by 60% of the record revenue, it would take us approximately 53,000 years to retire the entire deficit.
yeah.
You know, that's right away to use.
Do we know how much annually or we?
In the secretary's comments, she indicated uh, what the 10% is. So 2 million, well, 2 million, 2.5 million, sorry, 2.9 million for this fiscal year or the past fiscal year.
Do we know what the past fiscal year?
I think, well, it varies depending on the grants, right? So the last when I met with Agnes, I think that's her name. The the prior year was only 700,000.
Request for that.
I don't know, I just, it might be, maybe, because if there's a mechanism to always try and reduce the deficit at the end of the fiscal year, then there's no real responsibility of trying to stay within the budget, right? Because, oh, it's okay, we have this 60% IDC that could help reduce the deficit.
Right.
So putting cushion in there to, it's almost encouraging to continue the deficit spending.
So, what do you think about the breakdown provided by FP then?
How do you come up with the percentage? First commercial, how do you know the breakdown?
The amount of work performed for grants, and then just equally.
And these percentage are validated by each division? Like, do we get their concurrence on the amount of the amount of time that they put into providing the service? So that we know that we are allocating the appropriate percentage to them?
Not from, it wasn't included in secretary's letter.
May I? Sorry, Chair.
Recognize.
I think if we are going to proceed with the the allocation proposed by the grants office, then I think we should do our due diligence and also just clarify and validate with the divisions and offices that were listed on here to ensure that the percentage allocation that they are listed here are, reasonable and appropriate for the amount of time and work that they provide on administering the grants. It's just a recommendation.
Yeah. If these divisions are good with the members and that we are going to proceed with allocating to these, I can get more information. But if that's what the committee chooses, that these are the entities that should be receiving these IDC, then we can table it.
Chairman, a question. So basically, when you agree to this, you're saying you don't want it to go to the deficit. Basically, right?
Or we're using this to address division needs, and then whatever would have paid for it from the general fund could be used to address the deficit.
Because the bill's intent is for deficit, and I guess the question is first, is it allowable? Then, if we say it is allowable, then we have to decide whether it's for deficit, and then because I guess what the AP is trying to do here is to say never mind the deficit and give. That's what we're yeah. Because it's 100%. So that's the question I think that we need to decide because this bill is about deficit.
I mean, for discussion from the members, is this if we want to keep the current language at 40, 50, 10, we can. I mean, this is just a proposal, a recommendation, and so um,
Just clarification, Chair. So with the 60% that's being proposed, we're going to take a percentage of that to allocate on what was recommended by grants office. And then a portion of the percentage would also be used to reduce the deficit. Is that how I'm understanding?
no, right now it's either we do the 50 deficit, 10 financial
50.
services, and then 40 OGM, or the suggested breakdown
The-
provided. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's a question. If even if this is for the deficit, right? This is funding that should be resources. Is that identified in the budget? If when we pass the budget, is this an amount that is reflected in the resources?
It's going to reduce the available resources, yes.
We identify this. What was the amount for this fiscal year? Is it
2.5.
yeah? So was that in the budget total?
Yes.
114 is part. Huh?
Yep,
Yes.
Yep, yes.
Dave? So in the future, it will show that there's that amount, and in the budget worksheet, it's going to show 60% of that deficit for deficit. Yeah. Okay, so then it will just be a language notwithstanding public law, da 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 da. This shall be used for medical referral, no, or this. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, It's either we divvy it up or see a decrease in our available resources every year. It's the same thing. It's like taking our overall budget and allocating 2.9 of that to deficit reduction. It's kind of just
Well, presently, if we don't have this law, then then it's Mr. Cabrera that just decides where to use it now
No.
under the present law, right?
no. It's us. We appropriate the 65% in the budget
Oh, this fiscal year.
every fiscal year. Yeah.
Also, how was he
He
able?
only gets 35%
Also, right now the 35% is what he's giving
using for
different.
his operations.
Okay. Let me see.
So even if we take it out of the budget, we're still giving it back to the agencies. So it's like,
But in the budget, we have a little bit more autonomy on how we appropriate
correct.
that 60% versus putting it into law and just automatically not giving these agencies.
You're marking pretty much.
I don't know, I mean, currently in the financial situation.
So how does that? Let's say we pass this and it becomes a law. How does that affect the fiscal year budget? When you're already saying 5% here, 20% there, and then the budget already appropriated it, right? So what happens there? Let's say we pass the deficit 60%. So basically, you're going back on in the budget, right? You're saying we appropriated this for that and that, but now it's going to the deficit. So notwithstanding, we have to put the language
Yeah.
here. Notwithstanding the this fiscal year, right? Already, yeah. Mm.
How do we control the deficit?
I'm saying it's counterproductive, right? Because now there's this mechanism in place that's always gonna reduce the deficit. And instead of just striving to, spend within your budget, it's like, it's okay because we have this thing out
The
there.
cushion, the 2.9 million cushion or whatever the.
It has to be a constitutional amendment so that we cannot keep suspending it.
I mean, there's the Constitution says it has to be retired every 2 years.
Oh no, but what I'm saying for this money, if it's a constitutional amendment, then it's guaranteed that it's going to go to the deficit. Otherwise, the conference committee will keep saying it will keep suspending it year after year. Doesn't matter.
No, but then if it goes into the departments as suggested, then
But it doesn't matter because in the budget they'll just suspend it. It's just earmarking now, but they can suspend anytime.
so how would the members like to proceed?
I guess Senator Dennis, you have an amendment for the 40 and the 20 only, and then the rest deficit.
Como vai bem unfair, yeah.
We can put a percentage towards deficit reduction, but then keep some of these offices or reduce their percentages.
I think I'll be fine with that, but I think we need to take some due diligence and check with the offices here listed to ensure that the percentage that's allocated to them is, reasonable. Just how do we know, like OGM is asking for 40%, right? Well, others get 5%. Just wanna make sure that,
Right. No, but that would be further reduced if
if we,
we're gonna keep a certain percentage towards deficit reduction. Um, so I guess the next question is, do we want to keep all these divisions or just finance and accounting? What's admin services? Is that also in finance? Okay. Secretary's office. Unless you want to make it consistent, and let's put. But anyway, okay. Do you want to keep? Do we agree with 40% OGM? Yes. No.
Right now, it's how much?
It started then the law started them at 40, and then each year 1% decrease, and now they're at 35, and they're not going down any further.
35, and then if we do agree to this, and we give them 40, an additional 40%.
No, back to 40.
40%.
Right. So we give them 40, and then would you agree to 30% deficit and then 30 divvy up?
So we're not going to give it up the most.
30, 40, 30, 30?
What's the 30?
30, 40 OGM, 30 deficit reduction, and then 30 divvy it up with the 9 divisions. And then we'll kind of see which division handles more work to get more of the percentage of the 30. Any concerns?
Mr. Chairman, whatever that we give to, for example, finance what is, I'm not sure where FP was trying to recommend, because just want to ask how we could, if it's okay, right, to include, I'd like this for sub grant, so that this Roland gets some there. I think on item D, he was recommending 5%, 5%, and then Roland from the 20. So my point is, I don't know if the ultimate number will be 20, but whatever it is, that we agree to at least to help out some grant.
No, the 5% won't affect the 40,
That's not the
30, 20. It's off the 40 that's given to.
So that's what we was recommending.
It says provided further that concurrently 20% of the office budget. So of the 20% of the 40%, divvy that up 5.
Well, in his 40%.
In its 40, they're gonna take 20% to put in an account for sub grants. So that account, that 20% of. Yeah, I mean that's within his 40%, so it's not further affecting the remaining. I'm okay with. Right. So we're fine with suggestion D and E, and then for F, we're gonna add a provision that would um, that would require regulations be made for providing line of credit. Um, okay. So before we
Rollover, or these funds rollover? Scheme?
Dave, do you know there's fiscal year limitations?
Yeah, they have they put it quickly, how do them also put sometimes you have a sub-account, special account, totally already in there.
But what about these new accounts that we're creating? Or oh no, we're not creating new accounts. We're just transferring monies over.
Because, he allows here, he recommends on there that it's also for.
I think his sub accounts are
Reimbursement.
without.
So when you want something that can be reimbursed later, you're gonna get that back. So that's still available for next fiscal year.
Yeah, already, 40% will be funded over there. It has its own
Oh, okay.
savings
That's-
account already. Additionally, for this sub-grant, you can also special account there. So it's already gonna be accounted. Right, for the 20% or the 40%.
Line is okay.
Which one? Yeah, with the understanding that regs will be promulgated. In 6 months? No, or that should be fine because you're gonna have to identify how they're gonna administer the loan. Okay. All right. So I'll make the motion and then, but we'll table it provided that we get the breakdown of percentages for this agency divisions. I hereby move to include language as suggested by Office of Grants Management on their comments as indicated on line D, as stated on line E, as stated, and line F. And to include a provision that would require the Office of Grants Management to promulgate regulations within 6 months on the administration of any loan, cover cost share, and line of credits provided to or provided any loans that they'll be providing. All right. There was a motion that was made and seconded. Any objections to the motion? If none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have House Bill 23-56 SD1. At this time, we'll table that bill and then provide or request further comments with the amendments. And then as soon as we get the clarification on the division, we can act on this at our next committee meeting. All right, members. Last on the agenda, we have House Bill 2357 to establish the Health Network Program revolving fund account and provide funding from the collection of revenue from tax license and gross revenue tax penalties. Um, and there's a correction; it's tax liens. Any open for discussion, members? I think it's pretty straightforward. Any tax liens and penalties will pay for, or will just go into the health network program. I recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Did we receive any comments for this particular bill?
Not from I saw comments from Secretary of Finance. Did not get anything back. I did get a comment from CEO.
Do we have an estimated amount as to what we're looking at in terms of funding, like estimated funds to be?
Not currently, not the current penalties that are owed, but this would also apply to future penalties and tax liens.
I did request that information on like for Secretary of Finance.
Mhm.
He has responded.
Just revenue from tax. I did receive a report from Revenue and Tax this morning on the BGR aging, and I've yet to look at it and see what the tax penalties are, what we're looking at. But I could share that with you, Chair, and the rest of the members for reference purposes. Just so just anything with regards to tax liens and tax penalties will the whole thing will be going into
HNP,
HMP.
revolving fund, yes.
Okay.
Chair, no issue with this.
Yeah.
Can I ask our legal counsel if it's germane to include the language in here? One thing I noticed in the budget bill that was vetoed was a very simple language that actually says that inter-island referral shall be part of this because actually the law really is clear on that, but Oh, I'm sorry. So what I'm saying is anybody that's referred from Rhoda to Saipan should have the same benefit as that person being referred from Saipan to Guam, and it's not right now.
But the benefit is that if they qualify under Medicaid, because right now those are the only ones being referred to Island Medicaid patients. But right now, Inter Island, I think they're still sending anyone despite.
If they don't have the service on, if they have the service on Rhoda, they shouldn't refer them. If I'm concerned of those that need medical attention, but they don't have it on Rhoda. So if they have it on Rhoda, they shouldn't be referred.
Right. But because they don't have it in Rhoda, but they have it on Saipan, they're being shuttled for free. Anyone on Rhoda is being shuttled for free right now. But if we apply the same concept as off island, then only those with Medicaid can come for free. Those that don't have Medicaid, they'll have to pay their way to Saipan. So that's why they kind of have the two separate regs. So if we're gonna treat it as one program, then for the most part, it's the Medicaid.
Well, my point is, even if you're not on Medicaid, if the service is available on Saipan, they should send them medical referral here because they don't have it on Rhoda.
But the same can be said if they don't have it on Saipan, they send it to Guam, but only because you're Medicaid, they pay for it.
I think. Well, I think if the service is here on Saipan and you need to send that person to Saipan, regardless whether they have Medicaid or not, whatever the benefit of the referral should apply similarly as far as benefit is concerned. So maybe the legal counsel can draft a language and let's look at that. But I'm not comfortable in like patients being sent to Guam and they give $35 subsistence, and then we send our patients here because we don't have the service on Rhoda and we don't give them $35. They need to go out and eat, right? So can you draft a language on that, Mr. Legal Counsel, and we'll look at it because that's the intent of the health network program. My thinking should be the same. The question is it the right vehicle to include in here? Because there's going to be some uncertainty now with the vetoing of that provision, maybe. Okay.
I think it's just providing them additional funding. So the main question is, do we agree in putting all tax lien penalties into this program? Recognized Vice Chair.
Thank you. That only works anyway if the collections are on par, because as I'm looking at the aging report right now, just going back to 2019 to present, there's over 10, actually $13 million that's sitting on the aging. 10 million of those being what's currently due as the BGRT, and then around $2.6 million on just all the different penalties from failure to file, failure to pay, and the interest incurred on that. So just to be mindful, right, that even though we set aside the tax liens and the penalties, there's over $13 million right now sitting on the aging. So collection is very, very crucial to be able to even fund HNP. So just wanted to share that.
And this was the topic of the finance, right? Trying to generate revenue that they're trying to get the liens and the collection in.
And this doesn't even include the liens. This is just the BGR, they're $10.3 million, and then the rest are just penalties. So I don't know what's on the tax liens, but right now we are sitting at about $13 million of uncollectible BGR and penalties and fees.
Yeah. So the penalties and fees, based on that aging report, comes out to 1.7 million, which I think
I mean, I'm sure there's more. This is just data going back to 2019, right? So I'm sure there's more than 13 million sitting on the aging. I just requested for the last, 3 or 4 years. So just to get a perspective of where we are in terms of collections that's sitting on the aging.
This is a little bit on the side, but Dave, do you know how much is the judicial fund every year? And where are we on the judicial fund account? I thought that that's those penalties and all that were we used to being used to pay the judicial building fund. Pay also, where are those fees going now? Yeah, the revenue for that was used to pay the judicial building fund. On the judicial building fund? Oh, on that one? Yeah, please. Oh.
any further discussion?
I think Senator Poe was asking for clarification on the bill if we can do a ride along. So maybe we'll just wait on the legal counsel on that.
I just looked at it and I think
So we should just proceed with this and then we'll go back to that original bill. And yeah.
So on average, it would provide for about 400,000 each year. Okay. All right. Further discussion, members. If none, can I get a motion for the adoption?
The numbers that Senator Corina gave us is alarming. I'm going to ask that maybe we should call in that task force that's trying to collect it. And then also maybe we should see how Guam, other jurisdiction does it to have effective collection. Because this is just going to be another law in the book that says it goes there, but I think we need to amend it to put thief so that there's a system on how to effectively collect these taxes. And if we meet with that group, we can maybe talk about ideas on how to further strengthen this legislation. And so it's not a waste of time if we even ask them to comment. Did they even comment on this bill?
No, but it
So
was
we should at least, because they've been working to collect. And we read in the papers how they attach this property and attach that, but then it just stays in the court, for in the legal process for years. So we need to find out what should we do, and then put thief in here. Then that's the only time it would have value. It would have by giving it thief so that we can actually collect thieves, because it's not fair that people are paying their taxes and others are not, and then every we pass a law that says, what do you call that, attorney, when you
amnesty.
amnesty, you know. We pass an amnesty law, and then honest people paying their taxes, are being unfairly treated, because they will lobby the legislature every 5 years, pass an amnesty law.
One good thing I can ask the judges to verify it is how much they're receivable on penalties for the senior government for the DRT, for example. Because when you look at the financial senior government, there are two types there: balance sheet, the senior white financial statement. So the senior white financial statement will give us a long-term receivable on penalties that have not been collected for how many years. But the balance sheet will just give us the current year penalties. So that one we can get how much outstanding uncollected penalties today.
And
You
I
know,
don't even know how far back
yeah.
their aging goes, but it's just from 2019 onward.
Okay.
Senator Poe, it is alarming if you look at the failure to file loans. Jesus, it's
There's no point.
yeah.
It's just like 2019 to 2023.
Okay.
So can we get this ready, get the information, so that in our next meeting, then we can finalize it? I think just a little bit more information, and we can make better decisions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, with that said, then I will offer a motion to just table this and get further clarification.
All right. There's a motion made to table, and so we will again request for information, and if we can't get it through email, then we'll invite.
Yeah, and also to task maybe our legal counsel and our legislative assistant to give us idea language to put more teeth into this kind of legislation, see how other jurisdictions are doing it, to give it more teeth. And we appreciate if we can discuss that also in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And that takes care of all bills on agenda. We now move down to miscellaneous. Anything from the members? If none, can I get a motion for the adjournment?
So move.
All right, a motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:50 a.m.